This case should never have come to trial.
I don't think it's fair to call my clients frauds. Because one time I turned into a dog and they helped me. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would like to withdraw our plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty.
This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries, of a sham.
If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves.
And the truth shall set you free!
How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Oh, guilty, but with a real good excuse.
I think the truth will come forth.
You can't handle the truth!
Hello, everybody. It's time for more Law Light. Brought to you by Foreman Watson Holtry, FWHlegal.com. Today is a nice, cool, crisp morning, and we are situated in the library studio at the high-rise white brick edifice at 530 Frederica Street, Owensboro, Kentucky. PJ, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Get to have a couple days off. This is the last thing I'm doing, and then I'm going to be off for a little bit. Couple days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to head up to New York. I have a really interesting opportunity.
City?
We fly into New York City at LaGuardia.
Okay.
But even if you're not a sports fan, what I'm going to be doing will be very interesting to anyone. Told you a couple times, I have a son that coaches football at Western Kentucky University.
Yep.
And Western is playing Army in football this weekend, and they play them on 9/11. And so, first of all, West Point is supposed to be an amazing campus. Just, it sits on the Hudson River. It's just a beautiful, it's kind of in the foothills, And then you're going to be at Army on 9/11. Watching a game,
Right.
And so
it's the perfect storm.
Yeah.
In like a good way.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it. They're doing special ceremonies and stuff all day for 9/11, and so I've never been there, and so it's going to be an interesting, to say the least. I just it's a big day it's the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
And so.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I am a little nervous about flying into New York City and out of New York City. I'm flying in on the 10th and flying out of New York City on 9/11. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah, I see how.
They're not going to. I wouldn't think they'd target a flight from New York to Nashville, but I bet the
unless they really hate country music.
Yeah, well, you may target that flight.
No, I'm not that. I don't hate it that much. I was actually listening to country music yesterday.
Oh, were you? Who were you listening to?
It was a mix. I don't know who. I know like Chris Singleton was on there.
Oh, wait, Stapleton.
Yeah, right.
Chris Stapleton.
Obviously, I know my country singers.
Chris Stapleton's a good one to listen to.
I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got a couple things to talk about with you today.
Yeah. Real quick before we get into that. So what I think is really interesting is for those who can't see, you have something special on your head today.
I was going to get to that. That was one of the topics we were going to discuss.
Okay. Well, then I'll let you get to it, and then I'll say what I was going to say.
I feel like I'm talking softer.
You are.
Is that better?
Well, I don't think it's not necessary. I don't think it's better or worse.
Okay.
I find it interesting because without the headphones, you're like, blah, hey. With the headphones, it's like suddenly an ASMR episode. Yeah. It's like, hey, everybody. How are you doing over there in podcast land?
So PJ is making reference to the fact of the last two podcasts. I've mentioned how much I enjoyed our 100th episode when I got to wear the headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is a whole different experience doing a podcast. And it's like you block out the entire world, and you've got these earphones on that are noise canceling, and I hear my voice, and I hear your voice, and I hear the air conditioner.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And it's amazing how you hear the air conditioner. And I thank you very much. Actually, I think these are headphones that I gave to you, right?
Yeah, in the very, very beginning.
Very beginning.
And for some reason, I don't think we were able to, like with those, it was because we had to have a battery, and I didn't have a battery, and then you had these that I'm wearing now, and I plugged those in, and they worked fine, and then those got stored away in a drawer, and we finally broke them out.
For everybody out there, PJ deals with cameras that are worth more than some people's cars, and he knows all the stuff and gadgets. Between he and Vincent, they know all that stuff. But he brought these in, and he says, can't make them work. And I said, well, they take a battery. No, I've tried everything. Yeah. And I was like, no, there is a battery in these. And so I told you to Google it, but for all fairness to me, I discovered where the battery was before
you got to it before I had a chance to.
Because I knew it was a secret compartment. I remember that. These earphones have been to Africa.
Really?
Yes, they have. I got them shortly before my last trip to Morocco, and because of how they are very comfortable.
Right.
And I'll tell you something interesting about these earphones. This is when I discovered how cool it is to pee with noise-canceling earphones on.
Okay.
You can't.
Do tell.
You see the stream of water hitting the water in the toilet, but you don't hear it. And it is, your mind tells you, I should be hearing this, and you don't hear it.
Right.
You don't hear anything. And it really does make you're like, what's wrong?
Yeah, I had a similar situation with those, not peeing, but whenever I was in there trying to test them, before I realized they needed a power source of some kind, I was wearing them and I was typing on the keyboard, and I couldn't hear any of the keys, and it was really bizarre at first because I thought I should be hearing something.
I know, your brain it does.
Yeah,
there's a. For so long, the way neurons.
Then I had a panic attack because I thought I was deaf, and then I peed myself, and I couldn't hear that either.
Yeah. It was.
Now here's the other thing that I'm going to point out. So you're in Africa, and you have all the opportunity now to pee in the jungle, and instead you just pee in a toilet.
No, I'm talking about on the flight.
Okay.
I was on the flight, and I had them plugged into my phone.
Gotcha.
And so I had my phone in my pocket, so I got to use the bathroom, and I just kept my earphones on.
I'm also sure a lot of people still go to the bathroom in a hotel when they're there instead of just going out and peeing in the jungle.
In Morocco, we stayed in one hotel. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. It was a great. I've been there 3 times because my mother worked there, and so each trip was something new. Remind me sometime to tell you the story about eating lunch in a marijuana field. I've done it. And then the owners of the marijuana field came. Yeah. So anyway.
Okay.
All right. So we've covered the earphones. Thank you for getting me earphones.
You're welcome.
I'll never do another podcast without them.
They do make a difference. You can tell the big difference.
Definitely. I feel like a podcaster now.
You look like a podcaster.
I've got this Blue Coil audio pop filter on with a microphone stand that I'm not allowed to touch.
That's right.
Cup of coffee, earphones, phone nearby in case we need to reference something. I'm an official podcaster. Am I missing anything?
I was going to say, let me do something for you. And I'm going to do a real big no-no, and everyone out there in podcast land will hear this. But this is what I want you to hear.
Oh, yeah. That's why you always...
That's why, yeah. Because
it really does transmit, doesn't it? And you have to take all that out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, leave it in.
Well, unless it's mixed in with your audio, and then there's nothing I can do about it.
Right. Well, leave it in.
I'm going to leave
this.
Yeah,
that way people can tell that you were...
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, you made a loose promise, and I haven't followed up with you about your loose promise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I kind of did, but on Monday we were supposed to be able to check to see if we had gotten a download of the podcast in Hawaii.
Yes, my loose Hawaiian promise.
Your loose Hawaiian promise, and I can't wait. I'm so excited. for you to tell me if we finally have checked this off our list. So, break it to me.
Okay, so now I followed through with my loose Hawaiian promise. I had my friend Cassandra. She went there with some friends. She went to Maui. And while she was there, I reached out to her and I said, hey, do you ever listen to our podcast? And she said, admittedly, I've never listened to the podcast. Then I unfriended her, and that's the end of the story.
So
okay, yeah. So she was like, "Don't."
We still don't have a Hawaiian.
So she said, "Don't hate me. I don't ever listen. I haven't listened to your podcast." So I said, "All right, look, we're trying to get Hawaii on the map. If I send you 3 podcasts episodes I think you'll enjoy, will you listen to them?" And she said yes. So I sent 3 of them. I sent the one with Katie where I'm half asleep and we talk about butts a lot. I sent her the one with Stephen Ham, and then I sent her I can't remember what the third one was, but I sent her a third one. She sent me screenshots of her listening to them in Hawaii, in Maui. For some reason, they have not registered as any listens in Hawaii. I just checked, and they're still not there. And I don't know. I don't know why it wouldn't register it, because it was being listened to in Hawaii. And here's what's concerning to me. I just had someone who's never listened to the podcast before listen to 3 episodes in a whole other area, and it didn't register. How many other people are listening, and it's not registering their listens?
So what you're saying is we are way more popular than we think we are.
Absolutely.
There are people probably wanting us to start some merch.
Yeah, I think so.
A merchandise tent.
We could do that. We could set up a free account. We could go through
Lite podcast.
For real. Like, we could do.
Oh, I know. And we would sell
TeePublic.
3 T-shirts.
Maybe. But that's like $4. So that's $4 you didn't have before.
That's right. Well, it is bothersome. Maybe it's a conspiracy, since you and I always are talking about.
I'm gonna reach out and find out why that might be, because I'm wondering if, I don't know if it's an IP address thing. I don't know. Maybe Hawaii and Alaska just don't allow podcasts to be lit. Like, they're really not supposed to be listened.
Oh,
there.
that can't be there.
And
they are states in the free United States.
Are they really
federal? Yes.
I've seen a lot of memes about America recently on Facebook. So it's got to be true.
Listen, there's somebody trying to subterfuge or attack our podcast.
Girling.
The Hammer. It is. You're right.
Maybe it's Morgan.
Morgan and Morgan.
And the other Morgan.
Yes. You know what? It may be. Anyhow.
I don't think they have a podcast.
But the good news, you told me, is that we picked up a listener in Oregon.
Yeah, we're in Oregon.
Okay.
So now we're there.
So we're narrowing down the states that we have. Yeah, we're really getting close.
Honestly, I'd rather be in Oregon because, Bigfoot's there, and I'm a big fan.
Speaking of Bigfoot, Bart Darrell saw him one time on his back porch.
Supposedly. I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
Not now, I don't. I did in the moment until he finished his story, and then now I don't believe it.
Yeah, he had you going, didn't he?
Yeah.
I could tell. That was a great interview.
I was really upset.
I've gotten a lot of comments about that interview with Bart. Follow up real quick on a few things that we've touched on in the last couple, and let's forecast what we're going to do next week, okay?
Okay.
I was able to look at the Nirvana lawsuit online.
Mm-hmm.
The answer to the complaint. So the complaint was filed a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Was filed. You may imagine there is a litany of attorneys involved in the lawsuit.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Well, there's so many defendants. The guy didn't just name one entity or person as a defendant.
Right.
He named like art producer, art editor, art this, illustrate, photographer, and right down the line.
Yeah.
So
here's who I feel really bad for, and that's Dave Grohl. Because now I've never met the guy, but I have friends who have met him, and they say he's one of the nicest guys they've ever met in terms of like celebrities. And He took the time, he didn't seem rushed or like he wanted to finish the conversation. He talked with them until the conversation was over with, and then when it was done, they went on their way. And I mean, the dude is involved in like all this charity work, and anything and everything that you read about Dave Grohl points to how incredibly genuine of a person he is.
Okay.
Kind of like Keanu Reeves. I've heard nothing but good
Right.
things about Keanu. So I feel super bad for Dave Grohl because it's like all of a sudden he's got this guy going after him, and he didn't have any say
Right.
in that cover art.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that'll probably get dismissed out of the lawsuit pretty quickly. It may be a case that everybody says pay him some seed money and get him to go away. I don't know.
Right.
But the answers are being filed. Not all of them are in, okay? But the answers are being filed, but there's been no other real motions filed before the court.
Yeah.
So that's the update on the Nirvana case.
Well, here's the other thing. Here's this, and this is a legal question. So I've seen a lot of Twitter posts by other celebrities making fun of this case, but they also make really good points. Conan O'Brien posted a photo of him, like one of his school photos, and it was pretty atrocious. And his Twitter post said something like, found this in my parents' house the other day, and I don't appreciate this photograph being taken of me. They did not get my permission, therefore I am officially suing my parents for having taken this horrible photo. It's such an easy case to be satirical with because it really is it feels ridiculous. And then when you look at all the evidence against the guy, I mean, I don't care if he says, well, I mean, anybody could say, well, I did it at the time and I regret making those decisions. Well, guess what? That's part of the consequences of making decisions is regret. So just because you regret doing something doesn't take away the fact that you did it.
Right.
So, I mean, how much water does it really hold in court when the guy's got 6 other photographs where he took money recreating this photograph that he claims hurt his feelings or whatever?
Right. So in any lawsuit where you're claiming damages as a result of someone's negligent or their intentional acts that you claim hurt you, you have a duty to prove various elements of the case, okay? And so let's make it real simple, and we've talked about this before. Every driver has the duty to drive their car in the same manner that a reasonably prudent person would under similar circumstances, okay?
Right.
And so you don't even get to the issue of your damages, of how you were hurt and how much your medical bills were and how much wage loss you suffered, unless you prove with a preponderance of the evidence, which means the scales tip your way, so 51% or 50.01% of the evidence leans toward you. You have to prove the elements of the tort or of the cause of action. So in a car wreck case, for example, if you are driving down the road and someone is coming in the opposing lane of traffic, okay, and the two of you meet head on for some reason right at the middle line, all right, the jury could hear that and say, and let's say one of them sues the other, all right, the jury could hear that and say, well, I mean, where's the proof that he was doing something that an ordinarily prudent driver wouldn't do? You know, I mean, yeah, you hit at the yellow line, but you're allowed to stay within the, so you have basically the corner of two cars hitting each other.
Right.
And, you haven't proven that he was all the way in your lane or over his yellow line. You've proven that it happened on the yellow line. And so you haven't proven with a preponderance of the evidence, with 50.01% of the evidence, that the person driving the other car did something that an ordinary driver wouldn't do, okay? So you don't even get to the issue of, well, how much money do you get for the various ways of damage? Now, let's say that let's change one fact, okay?
Okay.
If we have a case where a person is looking at their phone, their head is down, and they run through a red light. Now, an ordinarily prudent driver would not do that under those circumstances, right? They would be watching the road where they're keeping a lookout, safe lookout. So if you prove that the guy was looking at his phone, runs a red light, there's a witness that says, yeah, he clearly ran the red light. The evidence, the preponderance of the evidence says he breached that duty, that ordinary care, ordinary driver under similar circumstances. That's been proven. So now you get to the issue of damages. Well, you can get up there and say, oh, this affected me, it hurt me, I have a sore neck. But guess what? You have to prove that, and you have to prove that with a preponderance of the evidence. And so how do you do that? Well, you have medical testimony, medical records, medical bills, and you have to put that proof into evidence.
Right.
Okay. So in his case, each of the defendants, he has made an individual, some type of claim against them. All right. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, something like that. Well, he has to prove all of the elements of that tort with a preponderance of the evidence. And so for each defendant, he may have claimed some type of different tort or some type of different cause of action.
Right.
He's going to have to prove those. So, I think knowing what I know, and there may be stuff I don't know, but knowing what I know, it seems to me to be an uphill battle on his ability to carry his burden of proof.
Right.
Something else that I think is going to be incredibly difficult is it will be hard to find a jury that hasn't already done some reading on this one. We've never really discussed on the podcast, but you have a process called jury selection. It's voir dire, depending on where you're at in the country, voir dire, but
right.
It's a jury selection process. Most abused on television than any other process.
Actually, I think we have talked, because I told you my my jury.
Well, you
duty
just
story.
never see the jury selection process on
Right.
TV. You always have the jury, and the jury selection process, if not most important, and is close to the most important, because you're picking the decision makers, and you have to kind of get into their mind and open them up to talk, so you can kind of find what their framework is for making decisions. Okay.
Right.
Well, a jury's not supposed to do any research on their own. And one of the first things I would do if I was on either side of this case is I would ask the question, have any of you read about this case? If so, what have you read? Have you already made your mind up? Kick them off. Kick
Right.
them off. I think you may have to get into some type of, you may have to get into like the Midwest or somewhere where, people aren't following these types of things. I would think in most metropolitan areas that this would be a hard jury to set.
Especially nowadays with social media.
Oh, right.
I mean, there's so many different forms, not to mention just because the first thing that comes to my mind was I was thinking like high profile cases, like what about the O.J. Simpson case? But then that goes back to like 93. So all you really had was television. So if you're not watching that on television or reading the newspaper, it might be a bit easier to find someone that's not tuned in to what's
Right.
happening. But nowadays, everybody has a phone.
They've read the articles.
Yeah.
So one of the things you have to ask is, obviously, the question you ask a potential juror is, I know what you've read, I know what you heard, I've seen the same things, but will you be able to make your decision today or this week or whenever, will you be able to make your decision based upon the evidence, the paper, the witnesses, the documents? Will you be able to make your decision only on that and tune out everything else in the world? A lot of people will tell a lie right there. Oh, yeah, sure, but they won't. They can't. There's no way you can dismiss your there's no way you can make your brain cancel out what you've already read about this case. So I think picking a jury is going to be an incredibly difficult part of this case.
Right.
Getting a jury that's truly vanilla, so to speak.
I've seen a lot of people post about this, especially when it initially happened, and a lot of people comment on it. And very, very, very few people I saw seemed to be on this guy's side. Everyone had already kind of made up their minds, as did I, where I said, well, it seems like an obvious cash grab.
Right. And that's, he may prove the elements of some of the elements on the negligence part or the intentional,
Right.
But will they award him damages? I don't know.
And see, that's the thing. It's proving that he has suffered some kind of emotional distress and trauma.
Yeah, and
based
the way
off
that
this
you would prove
situation.
that is, let's not to go much further into the legal analysis, but I've had clients claim that an event has not, and we've discussed this, not only affected them physically, but has affected them emotionally, behaviorally, mentally.
Right.
Okay. And so the way that you would have to look at counseling records.
Right.
You would have to look and see, well, was he taking antidepressants before this, and now is he taking different kinds of antidepressants? Was he taking anxiety medication before this?
Yeah.
How has that changed? And again, he has the burden of proving that it caused some type of damage to him.
Right.
And so it all has to come in through expert testimony and actual medical records and bills.
Now, can you subpoena a therapist to come in and talk about things?
Absolutely, yeah.
And they have to talk about the client.
Right. Because if I make a claim, and I have this conversation with every one of our clients, PJ. If they say, well, why does he need to see my last 15 years of medical bill records? Because you made it an issue in this case when you claimed that a moment in time caused some type of physical change to your body. If that physical symptom was there before, they have the right to know that.
Right.
And so the part of the work that we do back here that you never see because you're on the front end of the case,
right,
is answering interrogatories for our clients and getting deep into their medical history, because we have to prove. Now, a lot of times we do that on the front end. We tell you, we say we need to address this in our video presentation, So that's the update. We kind of great questions, and purpose of the podcast is to educate, But that's a little update on the Nirvana lawsuit. A second thing is I don't know if you've taken the chance to read about the guy in Butler County. Have you followed up on him?
There's two of them that I've been kind of following. One of them just passed away, and the family is trying to sue because apparently, I guess even though the judge ruled for him to do the ivermectin, the hospital apparently still refused to give it to him, and the guy ended up passing away, and they're saying that's part of the reason why. Is that the same?
No, I think in the Butler County, I had not seen that he had come off the vent yet, so it may be the same, and he went ahead and passed away.
There's another one, another case where an older gentleman, he was 74, was in the hospital. Same situation. Judge ruled and said, look, the family felt that they had exhausted all avenues to try to help him. So they said, well, what's it going to hurt to try ivermectin? And I will say this. I don't necessarily disagree with that line of thought, because if you have legitimately exhausted all options,
right,
and he's probably going to die anyways, it doesn't necessarily hurt to at least give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think you sent me a link where that line of thought was discussed. It was the other side of what does it hurt? It's like, I have tinnitus, I'm ringing in my ear, and it won't go away. I have it in both ears, one worse than the other. It's caused some hearing loss. Maybe why I like these earphones.
Could be.
But the I tried everything. I let them put steroid shots in my inner ear. I've tried oils. I've tried, and every time I'll be on Facebook and something else will come up and go, use this, age-old cure for tinnitus, and I'll read it,
right,
because I will
put cocaine in your ear,
whatever. I may put a drop of ivermectin in there.
Hey, you never know.
I'm just saying,
if you have parasites,
I
you should be all right
that too. And so when loved ones feel desperate and say, "Look, we've tried the infusions, we've tried zinc, we've tried everything else. He or she's never responded. Then why not? What's the law?
Right.
But I will say this. The curious side of me wants a report, and I haven't seen it yet. Not that I've done an exhaustive amount of research on it, but I have not read anywhere where a person is given this and within a day or two they are bam back at
unless you're Joe Rogan,
feel super duper,
yeah.
right?
Well, you heard about Joe Rogan, right?
No.
Maybe 5 or 6 days ago, Joe Rogan came out and said, "I have COVID." He immediately, or I should say, allegedly, started taking ivermectin, and 2 days later announced he was fully back. And COVID was gone.
Okay, so I have not heard that.
But it's only him saying it. And people are using that as proof positive that ivermectin works. And I'm like, that is not evidence.
Who administered it to him?
I don't know.
Right?
I haven't, yeah.
And how much was administered to him, and was it done through a medical,
From what I'm to understand, though, even if he did take ivermectin, prior to taking ivermectin, he had already started some kind of like antibody treatment and a couple other things to get himself back on track. So once again, to me, that's
not a scientific study.
That's not proof that ivermectin works.
What I need is, with 100 people were administered ivermectin and nothing else. They were in, this phase of their body shutting down because of COVID and respiratory. They weren't getting any, their O2 sats were terrible. And then within 24 hours of administering ivermectin, we saw better O2 sats. They were able to come off the ventilator, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
The cynic in me says you won't be able to prove that. But if it is, then okay, great. Yeah. Let's establish it. But until then, anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time. We've kicked this.
Yeah. Well, did you see the post? Did you see the post that I put on Facebook?
Yes.
They got all that.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I can say that was a true experiment in how social media will rile people up so much they start devouring each other.
Yeah.
And it's still no one changed each other's minds.
Sure.
And there's almost like 400 comments on this post. For anybody who doesn't know, basically, I put this post out there and I said people who won't take a vaccine made for viruses yet will take a dewormer made for parasites, that person is stupid. So now I started it by saying fact. So it was more meant to be kind of satirical versus, because that's not a fact.
Right.
That's my opinion. So, and I know that. So some people some people took it on the chin and real conversations were had. Other people got really bent out of shape. But there's this one girl that just would not back down. And she used this thing. She used something from Britannica.com to prove her point, saying that, well, it does work because viruses are parasites. Because, my counterpoint is that using a medicine that's meant for two types of intestinal parasites is not going to work against a respiratory virus, because viruses and parasites, for one, are two completely different things, and then one's intestinal and the other's respiratory. It's two different parts of the body. So anyway, this girl used Britannica saying, look, here it says that viruses are parasites. Well, some viruses are. But once again, this is where people forget that context exists. And before it says parasite, it says obligate parasite. So then I say, well, what's an obligate parasite? So then I go down the rabbit hole. Come to find out, obligate parasites are not the same thing as a typical parasite, like a worm that you would get in your intestines. So then I come back at her saying, well, here's the deal. Yes, are they parasites by word? Yes. In that case, you're right. But look up what an obligate parasite is, and then it undoes your point. Well, then she kept going, and then she ended up throwing. She found a chart from the CDC, and she threw that at me, and she says, "Look, they say that ivermectin is recommended." So I'm looking at this chart she sends me about ivermectin from the CDC, and she's not wrong. In this certain area of the world, they recommend that people take ivermectin, but then beneath it is a word in parentheses that I won't even begin to try to pronounce because I'll butcher it. But when you look that word up, it's a certain type of parasite that they're saying to use it against that is also called a threadworm here in America, which is just another intestinal parasite. So once again, I come back at her and I say, context. you have got to look up the definition of context. You can't cherry pick to try to prove your point, because what happens is then I take what you give me, I delve a little deeper into it, and now I'm able to undo what you're trying to prove, and it just makes you look dumb. Mm-hmm. And that was like 2 days ago, and she never responded. So either she's given up or dropped the mic on my side. But either way, but that's the thing. It's like context along with common sense has gone out the window so much that people just want to use surface information to try to prove their point. Yeah. That's why memes are like examples of true information for some people, and those people are the ones probably taking ivermectin.
Right. We were sent an incredible story by one of our team members. Yes. About a gentleman who, when he was 6 years old, contacted polio.
Paul Alexander.
His story is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt guilty for complaining about my ankle pain after reading his story. Yeah.
Did you cry reading?
I got emotional.
I did too.
I got like a lump in my throat and kind of that fuzzy feeling, you know?
Yeah.
Please, if you're listening to this podcast, do yourself a favor and listen to or read about the story of Paul Alexander. At age 6, contacted polio, spent a majority of his life still on in the iron lung. I'll be honest, I had no idea. I guess I knew of polio and I knew about the general time because I've heard my mom and dad talk about it.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I had no idea, about this thing called the iron lung. And then to see how he trained himself to basically trap air in his mouth, force it into his esophagus and into his lungs by using his tongue, making like a frog noise.
Yeah, frog breathing.
Right.
Yeah.
And he learned how to do that for a minute, and then 2 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and got himself to where he could have sustained time outside of the iron lung. Now, I don't want to ruin it. I want people to read about him. But here is why I'm sharing this. Number one, it's inspirational. The guy went to law school. He said, I did everything I went to church. I went to strip bars. I went to this. I thought that was funny that those two things. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
I got a chuckle out of that.
But I got it. It's like, he's like, I'm living life despite my affliction.
Right. Now, he is back into the iron lung pretty much full time. But the thing that came from me reading was his position on vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to summarize it shortly because I know our time is getting short. Here is what he said. He goes, the reason we have so many anti-vaccination people is because they didn't experience the polio decade.
Right.
And that is, once the vaccination was discovered for polio, it was almost like, did people still get it? Yeah, a few. Were there results from polio nearly as severe? No. The numbers dropped significantly because people saw the devastation of it. They saw the horror of what it did to a body.
Yeah.
They experienced it so closely that by the time the vaccine science then was a lot slower than what we have today. But by the years had passed, that when it came out, people rushed to get their polio vaccine.
Right.
And the ones that didn't, they were affected terribly by it still. And he said, I think that's the reason, is that so many people living now didn't live during that time, didn't see that. So vaccination is a foreign concept because they didn't see the true example of how it can work.
Right.
I mean, not that I needed convincing, but I just sat there and thought, I wish everyone would read this.
Yeah.
Didn't you?
That was one of the things that I took away. The other thing I took away is when he talked about how every friend he made while he was in the medical ward in the iron lung died.
Right.
That was one of the parts that really made me emotional. That's the thing. It's like, And I liken this to a lot of things, and I'm guilty of it because I eat unhealthy, right? And I'm only 39, and in my mind, I can't comprehend almost what it's like to almost. When I had my panic attack, I thought I was dying, so that was pretty horrible. But like, I don't know what it's like to have a heart attack, right? I don't know the severity of it. I mean, I can read about the severity of it. Despite all that, it still hasn't stopped me from eating a box of macaroni and cheese when I shouldn't, right? So I'm putting myself in harm's way by eating unhealthy and not exercising.
Right.
So the day that so it's easy for me to go and make jokes about it because it's in my mind so far off.
Right.
When in reality, I see people in the newspaper at my age dying of heart attacks.
Right.
So it's like it could be tomorrow. But it's the same as like people who drive under the influence. A lot of people will continue to drive under the influence until either they get into a horrible wreck and it affects their lives or someone else's lives detrimentally, or it kills them, which at that point it's over with anyway. But a lot of people who change, it's because they had a bad habit or behavior, a poor behavior that continued until something made them go, "Oh crap, something has got to change."
Right.
And I think that's the thing with these viruses. It's like, I'm sure people who lived through the time of tuberculosis, once that vaccine came out, they were like, "Let's get this vaccine." And that's the other thing. It's like medicine has come such a long way, and there's so many horrible diseases and things that are vaccinated against that at one time were pandemics or epidemics, and that the population suffered terribly until they found that vaccine. It's like now we're so far removed from all that, it's easy for us to go, it doesn't affect me, right? So then, and it's same with the flu. There was a time when the flu first came around, I can only imagine how many people the common flu killed
Right.
before the flu vaccine came around. And that's just the flu. And I don't think any of us in our lifetime have been scared of the flu.
Right.
I mean, I've gotten super sick from the flu where I felt like I was dying, but I was never like terrified I was actually going to die of it. 'Cause I was going to say, I'm not saying that we need a horrible pandemic to prove that point, but we're living in it now.
Absolutely.
And the ignorance is astonishing.
One of the things that amazes me is, and I can't be speaking for just myself. Tell me if this is happening. Everybody I've talked to says the same thing's happening to them. When I scroll through Facebook, it seems like now 3 or 4 new people every day. Please pray for my Uncle Jeff.
Yeah.
Please pray for my mother. She's on a vent.
Yeah.
Please pray for, and so it is hitting home with many people that, probably 3 months ago were out on a golf course. They were healthy. They were doing great. And now they're dead.
Yeah.
And,
somebody I graduated with right before our reunion.
Even when we were in the peak of this, I don't remember scrolling through Facebook and seeing people saying that. But when I say peak, back in March and April of 2020, I don't remember seeing it on Facebook like pray for my Uncle Joe or my dad, my mom.
Yeah,
you just didn't see. But now it's like it's somebody new every single day.
Yeah, it's much more commonplace. And this is the other thing that people don't think. People go, "Oh, COVID, it's just this. It's just the flu. It's just this. It's just that." What people don't realizing is that most of the time it's not even COVID that's killing you. It's exacerbating pre-existing conditions that you already knew you had or didn't even know you had.
Exactly.
And it's you get it, and then 4 days later you're dead.
Or it turns into pneumonia, which turns into sepsis, and then bam.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, this has been a very uplifting.
It really has.
Well, we have talked a lot about a lot of great things. I'm going to forecast next week, PJ. We are going to kind of bounce off of all these serious topics and stuff, and we are going to have version 2 of our Street Brawl Showdown. And
all right.
I am going to be working on the brackets.
Okay.
And we are going to discuss who the winner is for 2021 Street Brawl from Foreman Watson.
Sounds
Holtry.
good. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the other
Well,
episodes.
and you don't need to do that. We've only done it once.
It was only one episode.
We only did one time. That's
Was
why I
it not
told you this has been almost a year. We're like 2 weeks
wow.
shy of it having happened last time.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of new development, some new people on staff. Tyler is still recovering from shoulder surgery, so that puts a big. All you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's not go off on all that, but that's next week.
We have somebody new that we're pretty sure is all into Dungeons and Dragons, so they probably have some dark arts deep in their in their bag of tricks.
We have. Since that time, well, we'll discuss it. There's a lot
we'll
of
get
change.
there.
There's been a lot of change. Probably going to crown a new street brawl champion.
That's right.
Okay.
Sorry, Tyler.
Yeah. Well, he's getting stronger, so maybe next year he wins again.
Maybe.
Who knows? But we got some tough people around here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this has been More Law Light, brought to you by Foreman Watson Holtry, this time with earphones. Check us out, fwhlegal.com. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
This case should never have come to trial.
I don't think it's fair to call my clients frauds. Because one time I turned into a dog and they helped me. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would like to withdraw our plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty.
This trial is a travesty. It's a travesty of a mockery, of a sham, of a mockery, of a travesty, of two mockeries of a sham.
If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves.
And the truth shall set you free!
How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Oh, guilty, but with a real good excuse.
I think the truth will come forth.
You can't handle the truth!